Support proplaygames on Patreon.
Hey guys, how's it going? It's your boy Yeehaw Yadam back on the PPG channel, this time doing more Lorcana action. So Lorcana, we're getting closer to the date, and after all of the interesting news that happened with it, I kind of really stopped playing the game, just awaiting for further instructions right from the company. But the closer we're getting to the game, it does look like the game will be moving head first in August. So I'm excited to go ahead and showcase some of the online spoilers that we've gotten for the game, starting off with Gaston. So Gaston is a 2-mana 4/2 that's inkable, so already an insane amount of stats, that has Reckless. Now this is for the red archetype. Now red is an archetype that already has removal in form of the 5-mana spell that you can find here. I'm forgetting the name right now, but we'll add it right here. The 5-mana spell that is immediate removal for any card in the game. Now giving Gaston a 4/2 stat line means that it'll remove anything in the early game. Even in the mid game, 4 attack is just good enough to get around most of the bodies in the game. The fact that it has Reckless means that it can't lure, obviously, but it is a card that's obviously going to be exerting pressure on your opponent. If you can go ahead and clear their very small creatures, and you go ahead and play a Gaston, their medium-sized creatures are now going to be contested, so if they do lure, they know that Gaston will be able to clear it very, very easily, and they kind of have to be very careful when they want to go ahead and field these cards. So it's going to be an interesting form of pressure and removal that red gets. Now we've got Ariel. Now Ariel is a card that I'm actually super excited about. So if you guys saw a couple of our videos, I don't know if we ever ended up putting up, but we had a Princess Tribal deck that was in the blue-yellow color line that kind of used Moana to amass a bunch of princesses, and that princess control deck was able to take games left and right. It was a really cool deck that revolved around using Let It Go as our removal spell. Now Let It Go, if you guys don't know, here you go. It is a 5-cost removal spell that is singable. Now, what makes Ariel so good is that not only is it a 3-cost, it can sing for 5. Not only can it sing for 5, but it also has a defensive stat line in the early game. So it has the 2/3 where it has health instead of attack stats. It is a princess, which is another double dip for that archetype. And lastly, it is a searcher of a specific song. So the songs in that deck are all super duper powerful. If it's not a ramp song, it is a Let It Go. And if it's not removal and it's not ramp, then who cares? Either way, Ariel will be able to find it, will be able to sing it, and will be able to apply pressure while also maintaining the key stat line of princess. So honestly, I'm not trying to hype this card or say that the princess deck is going to be tier 1, but I'm very excited to play with it because that's the deck that I was kind of like messing around with, and I'm super excited to see how Ariel incorporates into that deck. Now we've got Anna. Now Anna, here you go. If you have a character named Elsa in play, choose an opposing character. That character does not ready at their next turn. So not a terrible effect. Weird form of interaction that purple has. Now purple, what it's really missing, it has card draw, it has early bodies, it has a lot of things going for it. It has control over the board. This is another control over the board type card. It doesn't really have a key tag that really matters in purple. It has hero/queen, which purple doesn't really do much with. Anyone, in my opinion. And it also has a terrible stat line. It has a 2/4, which is a defensive stat line, but for 4 is a little understated. Remember that a good stat line for 4 would probably be a 4/5 for a 1 lore. This is a 2 lore for 2/4, so we're going -2, -1 for an additional lore, and which isn't terrible, but usually cards that have that specific specification usually also have like evasive tagged in there somehow. Maybe make it a 1/4 evasive would have made this card a little bit more playable, but I'm just not convinced on its passive being able to be strong enough to create this card, because it is a conditional effect, right? You already have to control an Elsa. If not, it's just a 4-mana 2/4 lower for 2, and if you're playing versus a tempo or aggressive deck, they're just going to be able to outpace this card terribly. Now we've got Grab Your Swords. Grab Your Sword is a song that is singable. Steel, the archetype that is Steel, doesn't have a lot of singable cards, so giving them one is pretty darn nice. But giving Steel just consistently more removal is a little bit scary. So Grab Your Sword states, deal 2 damage to each opposing character. So if you guys have used Fire the Cannons before, which if you've used Fire the Cannons, you know exactly how powerful that can be, right? What Steel does, it doesn't have really big boom spells like blue and red and red have in terms of removal. It has very small chip damage effects that will go ahead, deal 2, deal 2, deal 2 until we remove the characters eventually, right? This card being singable is really, really solid because all Steel wants to do is keep up the tempo, and this just seems like a card that really allows them to do so. They have a lot of bodyguards. Mickey Mouse Musketeer, the 6-drop, wants to sing this card every single day of the week, so really solid card. Another really good Steel card. Wow. And then we've got King Triton himself. King Triton is just a big dude. I mean, he just is a big dude. It is what it is. He is a 7-mana 5/9, great stat line, actually overstated, I think, even for vanilla stats, and also lures for 2. So giving blue some top end Do they really need some top end? I guess so. If you want to play a mono blue colored deck, the fact that you can go ahead and ramp into a Trident feels pretty darn good. Just remember that we have a Cerberus that is a 5 mana, like 5/7, that can go ahead and contest the 5/9. That, you know, so just so you guys are aware of what vanilla stat lines look. For a 7 mana, you probably want to look at somewhere between like 7 to 10, like 7 damage, 10 HP, which we don't really see here on Trident. But the fact that he lures for 2 is really, really solid. This card is going to eat a removal spell every single day of the week, in my opinion, but big dude. Then we've got a Lilo. Now, Lilo is a 1 mana, 1/1, 2 lore. This is a very aggressive card because aggression in Lorcana is really, really weird, right? So the cards that lore aggressively have 2 lore, 1 lore, 3 lore, and are very low statted are very, very powerful. If you guys have tried the green yellow deck that just wants to lure very heavily for 1 drops, you'll see cards like Lilo in there, you know, more often than not, because all they want to do is say, do you have a 1 drop? Do you have early removal? No. 2 lore. Oh, do you have it on your next turn? No. Oh, another 2 lore. So it contests people that are playing greedier decks that just want to ramp and do stuff. So these blue red decks or just generalized blue ramp decks will go ahead and struggle versus cards like this Lilo, just like they've struggled versus that little gecko that I'm forgetting right now. Here's a little picture of that little gecko. This guy is just a terrorizer of the meta, but Lilo, I assume, will be something very similar to that. And then we've got Flotsam and Jetsam. Why am I doing a double reveal? Because these guys kind of work in conjunction with each other. They say, so Flotsam says, you know, it is a 5 mana 3/4 non-inkable card. Terrible stat line, but it does have 2 lore. Again, if you ever see something that has terrible stat lines, yeah, at least has to have something. So it has 2 lore and it has rush, which is pretty darn good. Then it has a conditional effect that says Dexterous Lunge. If you have his homie Jetsam onto the board, he will go ahead and give Jetsam rush as well. Now Flotsam, yeah, sorry, your character's named Jetsam will gain rush as well. So then Jetsam will give Flotsam evasive. So we have a 4 mana 3/3 that is inkable for 1. So he's a little bit better stat line and he is evasive. So this is a more playable card. If you are playing Jetsam into your decks, maybe you want to put in some Flotsams, but I just don't see them being played in purple in general because purple just has better things that it could be doing. You want to draw into cards that like do things as opposed to these really spicy little eels. And honestly, Ursula Spy, that ain't it, chief. Then we've got Pongo. Pongo, adorable little doggy. 4 mana 2/3, so again, terrible stat lines, but it is an evasive 2 lore, so this is very similar to Flying Luffy. Flying Luffy is a, I believe, 5/3/4/2 lore, so it has very similar ideas. You're just losing 1/1 for 1 cheaper. Now, does that really matter to you? It may or it may not. How early do you want to start using these evasive 2 lore to pressure your opponent might be completely up to you, and the faster the meta game starts to evolve, or if the meta is slow, you'll see a nice little teeter of these evasive cards. You'll either see Pongo or you'll see Mickey Mouse. There is kind of a huge spectrum here in terms of cards that you want to go ahead. And then we've got Kronk. Kronk coming in as a 6 mana inkable 6/6 for 2 lore. It's all coming together. Now, that was my attempt at doing a good little Kronk voice. Hopefully it worked out, but a big dude that Steel just gets to play. It seems like Steel just has a lot of big dudes, and we'll see a couple others down in this list of reveals. But honestly, I don't hate his stat line. A 6 mana 6/7 we already know is perfect stats, as was shown by Hearthstone. So also giving that perfect stat line a 2 lore, sign me right up. Then we've got a 2 mana Simba, the Protective Cub. Now, Simba the Protective Cub is a 2 mana 2/3 that lures for 1 and is a bodyguard. Again, very similar to the Hercules 3 mana 3/3 bodyguard that's now given to the yellow archetype, right? So now your yellow archetype decks, which is, you know, this princess deck that I had no form of bodyguard interaction, more form of control and tempo in the early game, I now get to play this Simba card that says bodyguard for 2/3, which isn't necessarily terrible and could allow me to stabilize versus these very aggressive early game decks. So I think Simba, nice card. Then we've got Tinkerbell. Now, Tinkerbell, holy guacamole, why is she so big here? But besides her being so big, her ability is humongous. We've got Tinkerbell, a 6 mana 4/5 that states that can shift for 4, so we can already shift on top of smaller Tinkerbells. It is a 2 lore, so it has a, you know, pretty solid stat line for its cost, but its effect is absolutely crazy. We've got Rock the Boat. Rock the Boat states when you play this character, deal 1 damage to each opposing character. So once again, if you're Steel, and this is a Steel archetype card, and you've pinged your opponent's characters, deal 2, deal 1, you know, you've done these little small chip points, you can have Tinkerbell come down, finish off the board, and also, not only that, she has the ability Puny Pirates. During your turn, whenever this character banishes another character in a challenge, so once this goes ahead and clears another character, you may deal 2 damage to an opposing character. So consistently, this card can go ahead and just keep up damage, keep up spreading the damage to your opponent's cards, and then you can all of a sudden do all of this, and then you can, boom, you know, play that new 5-card singable card. the grab your swords, and you can just immediately start clearing the board alongside that. So very good tempo cards. What Steel was really missing was like some top end that can deal with your opponent's board. It kind of needed a secondary color to do that, but now we've got Tinkerbell that can kind of do that on her own. Now we've got Befuddle, and let me tell you, I love these cards, these little Merlin cards. Love the King and the Sword in the Stone. It's been a while. Love Sword in the Stone, but this card just ain't it cheap. It is a 1 mana song that states, or 1 mana action that states, return in a character or item with a cost of 2 or less to your opponent's hand. Now, yes, this does help you stabilize in the early game, but it doesn't really do much more than that. By returning a card to your opponent's hand, they're just going to be able to play it again. It is inkable nonetheless. It is 1 mana, so it's not necessarily terrible. But the way you want to look at this card is, if you are playing this in your deck, which you could be playing in some sort of Amethyst deck, your opponent plays a big drop, specifically things that are very impactful towards the board, cards that challenge, cards that want to go ahead and get these effects by swinging at your opponent's characters, like Aladdin, for example. You go ahead and bounce them. The issue is, if you do run into a deck that has like Aurora in it and is just completely making all your characters immune, the Befuddle really isn't going to do much. Befuddle also helps you kind of combat the evasive mechanic in terms of like, that's a big evasive dude that I have no way of interacting with. Slow down a turn, and then they're gonna have to recast it if they want to go ahead and do it. So honestly, it's not the best of cards, it's not the worst of cards. It is very situational, and it is a very interesting piece of removal that your opponent can go ahead and use. Just remember that in this game there is limited card draw, and in using a 1 mana spell in a limited card draw format where they can just replay it back down, it's not necessarily terrible, because in the late game your opponent's going to have like 1 or 2 cards in hand, and you befuddle it, they don't really mind replaying it, right? But if that is enough tempo for you to win the game, then who am I to disagree? Now we've got Merlin, my homie. Merlin is a 4 mana 3/4, so solid-ish stat lines, and he has a very interesting effect. He has the effect support that we've already seen with Hey that states, when this card quests, you can go ahead and add its attack power to another character. So if you have a sort of combination of your blue with some sort of challenging character, some weak weenies that you want to go ahead and use to challenge something that's already been damaged, you can go ahead and use Merlin, give that a character 3 attack, and have that go ahead and contest something else, which isn't necessarily terrible. But for 4 mana, the blue archetype kind of wants to be doing different things. You want to be playing Mickey Mouse Investigator that's going to go ahead and ramp you to your Auroras, which will then get you further and further down the line to your big characters. I'm not necessarily sure if Merlin really fits into that deck, but we'll have to go away and find out. Now we've got Ariel, 4 mana 3/3. Now this is another princess that is in the blue archetype. And what it says is, look at this stuff. Whenever you play an item, you may ready this character, which is cute. Not a terrible effect. If you do have some items that you want to go play in your yellow-blue deck, this might have a place. And there are some items that we might be wanting to incorporate, but I don't really necessarily think that that effect is going to be happening too often. Big issue with Ariel is that it's not inkable, and its stat line leaves something to be, you know, really wanted. A 3/3 for 4 isn't great, especially if you can't ink that 4, which means that it could be a potential brick. And the fact that it only lowers for 1, it might just not be it. Now we've got a Donald Duck. We've got a Donald Duck in the 5 cost stat line, which is something that we haven't seen before. We've got Donald strutting his stuff. 5 mana 4/3 that says ward. Opponents can't choose this character via effects. They must challenge this character, which is a very powerful effect. So a lore for 2 for a 4/3. If you have the board advantage on your side, you slam Donald Duck, and Donald Duck's just going to start questing until you have an out for him, because the ward mechanic is just that powerful. Then we've got Zeus, God of Lightning. Very solid card, honestly, for the purple archetype, where we have a 4 mana non-inkable 0/4. So you're starting to see 0/4 for 4. What are we talking about here? But what Zeus can do is, not only does he have Rush, which is already a broken tagline in almost every single card game that's ever been printed, it has Challenger +4. So not only can this guy come down on the board and contest, once it contests, if it lives, again, it has a 4 health stat line, which is very, very healthy. If you are able to lore with him, he will give you the 2, but the fact that he has a 0 cost stat line or a 0 attack means that it's very risky to use him in that manner. You're going to want to use this card as a removal spell, not really to lore, unless you have the ability to. But if you're loring with this card, you're winning. And then we've got Simba in the Steel archetype, a 1 mana inkable 1/2. Great stat line, honestly. Defensive. Says, guess what? When you play this character, you may draw a card and discard a card and filter at the same time. Sign me up. This Simba looks like a great 1-drop for the Steel archetype. It's going to be contested by the Captain Hook, but honestly, would you rather have a 1 mana 2/2 vanilla, or you have a 1 mana 1/2 cycle? Completely up to you. Now we've got Peter Pan, a 3 mana inkable 3/2 that says evasive, lore for 1, aggressive stats, evasive. But what you want to be doing with evasive cards are either A, like this Peter Pan basically says, I want to be used as a removal spell because it comes down, can be interacted with, and then you want to just go ahead and remove cards that have a 1 attack stat line, which there aren't really many of those. It kind of just wants to go ahead and contest this little chameleon specifically. But other than that, there isn't really cards that Peter Pan wants to go ahead and deal with. It's also I mean, you can go ahead and start luring with it, but if it was a card that you want to just lure, it would have more lure value to it, right? It wouldn't just be a 1. Either way, for 3, a 3/2 isn't terrible. It can go ahead and trade with things. Hopefully, if it trades with 2 things, then you're really getting the value out of it, but I don't think it really can, specifically with that stat line. Now we've got Maui. More big dudes for the Steel archetype, honestly. Now this is an 8 mana, 8/8 lure for 3. Did we need this? No. But did we deserve this? Yes. Don't really know what more to say about this Maui. He's just big. Is big good? Maybe. Big good blue ramp? Yes. We'll see. We'll have to go wait and see what type of deck he falls into. Then we've got Sven. Sven is a 6 mana 5/7. Again, very similar to like King Triton. If you want to go ahead and look at King Triton, is a 7 mana 5/7 lure too. So for 1 mana, you get 1 more lure. I don't know. I don't really know how they're balancing these vanillas. They're just kind of doing things interestingly. And then we've got Rapunzel. Rapunzel is going to go bad and be a 6 mana non-inkable 5/4, which that's a lot, but it also does lore for 2, and it has a really interesting character effect that says when you play this card, each opponent loses 1 lore. The most interesting card of this, the most interesting text or word in this card's effect is the fact that it says opponents, meaning that there might be hinting at a potential multiplayer format where you can be playing with 4 players like Magic's Commander, maybe a 2v2, 3v3. Who really knows? Well, I guess we'll have to wait and see how absolutely powerful Rapunzel will be coming down. But this card, to me, signifies the opportunity of playing like a free-for-all format in Lorcana. And then once we've gotten there, we've gotten to basically all the cards that have been revealed at this time. Really excited to see how Lorcana goes ahead and develops. There's going to be a really interesting card game. At least set 1 looks like it's going to be a smash, a slam dunk, if you will. So I'm excited to go ahead and see when this game comes out and how the meta develops for it. So we're going to be doing more Lorcana videos as we get closer and closer to Gen Con, because that's when we all know the invitational structure deck thing is going to go on. So I'll be making sure to give you guys the updated ideas on how to go ahead and do the best that you can at that Gen Con Invitational. With that being said, guys, that's going to be the end of the video. If you guys enjoyed it, please hit that like button. If you want to talk about Lorcana and what you expect Lorcana to be, the meta, are you excited for it, Princess Control, Stitch Gaming, I don't know, leave a comment. And as always, guys, I'll see you guys on the next video. Later.